Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Kumbhakarna. Kumba is a guardian who has a mix of damage and hard CC, and is only really ever seen as a support. Let me just tell you guys now that Kumba is pretty much the worst guardian in the game. Not down to balance necessarily or anything, he's just very outdated. I'll touch on that more at the end of the video. He is fun though, so he'll definitely still be worth checking out if you've already got a few relevant support gods under your belt. Build-wise, Kumba actually deviates from the standard support build a little. You of course go your classic prophetic cloak to start, and go a counter item or an aura item here and there, but since Kumba has some of the slowest CC in the game, which is also lacking in range, both cooldown and movement speed are seen often on him. His damage too actually isn't bad, so buying a straight up damage item isn't a bad idea at all, especially with the rise of Chronos Pendant and Spear of Desolation. Relics wise, first off you can go something like a Meditation, Shell, or a Sprint, depending on whatever your team needs the most. Choose wisely though, because your second slot should really be Blink on Kumba, even after the nerf to it at the start of the season. Again, like I said, his CC is slow and doesn't have very good range, so this is still a very important relic for him despite Blink not being particularly strong this season. Shard wise, you typically want to just go Horn Shard. He can work well with Carapace Shard too since his damage is solid, but Horn Shard is the classic safe bet. Let's get into one of the more interesting passes in the game. When Kumba dies, he just kind of falls asleep. While in this state, he can't move, he is CC immune, and can use only one of his abilities, which we'll get to later. After a whopping 8 seconds, he'll wake back up with 35% of his health and mana returned to him. While asleep, however, he can be basic attacked to kill him for scaling him out, starting with 6 basic attacks and ending at 20 basic attacks needed to kill him while he's asleep. The passive also has a 2-minute cooldown, so don't go thinking you can go and take a nap at every opportunity. This of course affects his playstyle a little bit, especially later in the game since he takes so many basic attacks to take down, but it can be quite effective in the early game too if your lane matchup is even or you just plain have an aggressive ADC early. Kumba's mix of damage and CC early on with an aggressive hunter, preferably one with CC of their own, can make 2v2s against Kumba extremely difficult, given that you basically have to first get through a wall of damage and CC from Kumba and his ADC, but then you have to kill him again while the enemy ADC is still killing you. It ain't easy. This of course doesn't always work. If you lose the fight hard enough, your ADC is just going to be forced to back up and you're going to blow this very important passive, as having to kill Kumba twice during a fight is either seen as, oh god, we have to kill him twice, or, oh, we have to kill him as passive real quick, let's keep going. I would say this dictates your level of aggression on Kumba, but not really. He's a very aggressive god by nature, and this passive more or less just gives him a second chance to be a major pain in the ass for the enemy, and promotes his aggression. But that said, a bad death on Kumba is made twice as bad since you burn this passive, alongside, well, dying. Let's get into part of why Kumba needs to be aggressive with his first ability. Kumba dashes forward. Upon connecting with an enemy god, he stops and deals damage. Upon connecting with an enemy minion, however, he will fling the minion forward, and the minion becomes a long-range projectile which goes through all enemies and walls, dealing damage as it flies. A fun little trick you can do is flick your camera as Kumba connects with the minion to change the trajectory of the minion. Get this method down so you don't have to position yourself exactly where you want the minion to go, rather aiming it at the exact moment you hit the minion so it becomes less predictable and therefore more accurate. So, a fun ability, but you're probably thinking, this seems kinda useless. And yeah, it is. The damage it deals is really solid to be honest, so it gives Kumba decent wave pressure, but he's expelling his only movement ability in this core kit just to deal damage. And also, of course, this means that Kumba's dash can be body blocked too. Other high damage Guardian abilities usually do something to benefit the team. Jing's first ability lowers basic attack damage, RTO's first ability shreds protections, Ymir's 2 slows, and so on. Definitely not a great ability, but it's a lot of fun to use, and you can combo it with just about every piece of CC you have as Kumba to smack some damage on top of people. And of course you want to use any and all minions at your disposal to boost the damage. This is very easy to pull off with the help of Kumba's second ability. Kumba winds up for 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, he slams down in an AoE in front of him, damaging, rooting, and crippling all enemies hit. This is a very basic ability that doesn't have a lot of tips and tricks to it, and luckily if you're a new player, timing it isn't exactly complex either. You really just spam this ability as much as you can. And as you might be able to tell already, this is part of why movement speed items are seen so often on Kumba as well, so that he can be way out of range of this ability but still catch people with it by simply running at them while it charges. It's not all sunshine and rainbows of course, as this is very reactable in a number of ways. For one, you will get CC'd out of this ability. Luckily, Kumba cannot be knocked up while the ability charges, but roots, slows, stuns, and so on will take Kumba out of the ability. So realistically, if the enemy support has their monitor on, you're getting knocked out of this ability before it's able to connect. Keep in mind though that the ability doesn't go on cooldown when this happens though, so all you can do is try again with this ability until it connects, since this is Kumba's only real ranged CC ability, and it's only sorta ranged. Of course though, the enemy backliner that you're inevitably trying to hit with this ability could also just use their movement ability to get away from you before the ability ever goes off. And they most certainly will. But that's part of what this ability is good for, forcing out movement abilities left and right and CC on you left and right, since it's not really a missable ability from the Kumba player. And that's where the cooldown reduction in the build comes from too, just to constantly be waving this impossible to miss medium ranged root cripple around as a constant threat. And as I mentioned earlier, a pretty easy combo is to root an enemy while they're in the minion wave, then use your 1 on the wave in the direction of the enemy you hit to slam the minion right into their face. Another ability that lets you do this is Kumba's third ability. Kumba mesmerizes all enemies in a circle AoE around him. Enemies broken out of the mez before it completes are slowed and have their attack speed slowed, and by a lot too. Also, Kumba can use this ability while in his passive, so if anyone is silly enough to walk up to you while you're asleep, you just yawn in their face and watch them cry because they can't hit you. This is a nice 2-part ability. Mesmerizes, even a 3-second one like this, are generally seen as a bad form of hard CC, but then the slow when it's broken early is a nice way to balance it out and make it still effective. Kinda. The Mesmerize, despite being a weaker form of hard CC, still has a delay on its usage, and of course is heavily affected by DR, since the longer the duration of the CC, the more it's affected by DR. This makes it hard to recommend using your 2 to root people in place, then hitting it with the Mesmerize, since the Mez will be much lower in duration thanks to the DR the 2 will inevitably apply. This is again where those CDR and movement speed items come in to save the day. The bonus movement speed allows you to get in range for this ability quickly, and also make up for that short delay with the startup of the ability. And the CDR is useful since it's a great ability to spam constantly. It's not as useful as a stun, that's for sure, but it's still stopping everyone with yet another unmissable hard CC ability, and it's a pain to deal with if you're on the enemy team. So in short, just like his second ability, be getting in people's faces with Kumba and spam this ability like no tomorrow to stop everyone in their tracks. It also makes for great setup when teamed with Kumba's ultimate. Kumba becomes CC immune and dashes forward. If he connects with an enemy god, he damages and launches them up into the air, and upon landing, they are dealt very high damage and deal damage in the AoE around them, this AoE also knocking up as it deals damage. This ability doesn't have a designated use necessarily, as it's useful about just anything and everyone. Got an enemy jungler who's dunking on your backline constantly? Save the ultimate for them. Got an enemy soul laner who's just leaping on your entire team endlessly? Save the ultimate for them. Got an enemy mage or hunter hyper-carrying the game? Use the ult on them. The difficulty really comes from 2 factors. One, it can only be used on one person in a fight, but you need to use it in a fight to be effective as Kumba. If your ultimate is a dud, you're basically just walking around mesmerizing people and that's about it. And secondly, its range is god-awful. You really need to team your CC with it to get a guaranteed hit. But as I've been saying throughout this, Kumba's CC range and deployment speed is very slow, so it's kinda hard to say, yeah, just root him, it's easy, especially when it comes to late game. But that's where Blink comes in. Study the ultimate range and speed, practice Blink ulting, and Kumba instantly becomes twice as useful. The ability is nearly impossible to react to if you space yourself well and perform a slick Blink ultimate combo with no downtime between blinking and ulting. Don't forget about combos after they land too, and speaking of which, let's get to some with Kumba. 2, 1, 3. 3, 2, 1. 2, ult, 1, 3. Ult, 2, 3, 1. Ult, 3, 2, 1. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 1 at level 3. You get your 2 at level 1 for a more reliable clear on the jungle camps, but whatever you get for your second level is sort of up in the air, just go with your personal preference. Same goes for the rest of the leveling order. I like to max the 1 to maximize pressure in the early game in an effort to not get behind, since Kumba from behind is about as useful as lids on a fish's eyes. From there I like to max the 3 then the 2. I did the 2 last since the root duration remains the same as you level it, although if you're going more of a damage route with Kumba, I can see leveling this over the 3. So that's Kumba. It's a shame he's not very good because he is a really fun character, but he also ends up being very unfun to play against, especially in casual game modes like Arena and Assault where you're fighting constantly, because he basically requires you to play him in that really annoying CDR and movement speed style to be even close to effective. At this point in Kumba's life in SMITE, his design just doesn't really work. Gods like Maui, Yamoja, and Atlas just make him look ridiculous, and there isn't much to be done with the character balance-wise other than just rework some of his abilities, especially that first ability. His CC comes out slower and at shorter ranges than just about everyone else in the support role, so it's no wonder that some people just build him more damage oriented and put him in the solo lane with the intention to just blink ult an enemy backliner and one-shot them. And the only reason that ends up working for them is because the people playing that way are some of the best players in the world and they're just doing it for fun. And if you need any further proof of Kumba's ineffectiveness, just watch one of the latest SMITE Pro League matches where Kumba actually got picked after a long absence from pro play and basically got memed to death and was completely useless for the entire game. I mean, he got killed while the enemy support was playing chess, so. It's a shame to see an old character like Kumba be so weak, but that's just kinda how it goes. Kumba has gotten less and less effective with every new Guardian released, and now we're here. If I had anything nice to say about him, like I've been saying, he is really fun to play as, especially in that early and mid game, and to be fair, he is extremely easy, so if you just despise the support role but want a god to play when you get the role, Kumba might work for you since you can basically just mash buttons with your monitor turned off, and you'll basically be doing as well as Roar did in that SMITE Pro League match I was just talking about. But if you're at all serious about the support role, I would highly recommend pretty much anybody else. That's all I have on Kumba for now. Thanks for watching.